My sister's wedding was interrupted by a major who tried to pull rank to get a better seat. I whispered 4 words in his ear that made him turn ghost white. I arrived at the botanical garden 3 hours before my sister's wedding was set to begin. The late September sun beat down as I helped Maurice, the wedding coordinator, arrange chairs in neat rows facing the flower-covered arch. Kendra had been planning this day for over a year, and I wanted everything to be perfect for her and Marcus. My parents showed up shortly after, Mom fussing with centerpieces while Dad checked the sound system. Patrice was in her element, greeting early arrivals with hugs and directing them to the guest book. Cole stood beside her, beaming with pride as he shook hands with Marcus's parents, Tamika and Malik. The ceremony started 15 minutes late because Marcus got emotional during the rehearsal of his vows. Kendra stood patiently beside him, holding his hand while he composed himself. The 50 guests waited quietly, understanding the moment needed time. That's when I noticed him. A tall man in an army dress, blue uniform, walked confidently down the aisle toward the front rows. He stood at the back for about 30 seconds before making his move. Maurice intercepted him quickly. "I'm sorry, sir, but the ceremony is already in progress." The man flashed something that looked like credentials. "Security concerns. I need to be seated near the family." "Security." My mother overheard and immediately made room in our row. "Of course, Major. Please join us." She looked impressed by his uniform covered with ribbons. I felt something was off immediately. His posture was wrong. His ribbons were too many and arranged randomly on his chest. His boots were perfectly shined but looked brand new, never worn for actual service. The ceremony resumed, and Marcus finally collected himself enough to finish his vows. I barely heard them. My attention kept drifting to the Major, sitting 2 seats away from me. Kendra and Marcus exchanged rings, their hands steady despite the earlier delay. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, to applause from the guests. The Major clapped louder than anyone, drawing attention during what should have been a quiet moment. I studied him more carefully. His uniform creases were too sharp, like they came straight from a dry cleaner, rather than military laundry. The ribbons on his chest told impossible stories of heroism and deployments that couldn't align with his apparent age. My buddy Holden, who served with me in Afghanistan, leaned over during the recessional. "What's with the official military presence?" he whispered. "Not sure," I muttered back, "but something doesn't add up." The ceremony concluded and guests moved toward the cocktail area on the garden's stone patio. I watched the Major follow, walking with exaggerated confidence as he approached my parents. He positioned himself near our family during the post-ceremony photos. Brielle, the photographer, noticed his uniform and waved him over. "Sir, would you mind joining the family portrait? It would be an honor." My mother beamed as if we'd been granted a special privilege. I clenched my jaw and smiled for the camera. 2 tours in Afghanistan had taught me to spot details others missed. And every detail about this Major screamed fake. Cole shook the Major's hand vigorously. "Thank you for your service, sir." The Major gave a rehearsed response about duty and honor that sounded like it came from a movie script. His eyes darted around, assessing which guests seemed most impressed by his uniform. I texted Holden from across the garden. "Check out his ribbons. Something's wrong," Holden responded moments later. "Way too many for his age. Arrangement is all wrong too." The cocktail hour continued while I watched the Major work the room. He used basic military terminology, but gave vague answers when my cousin Lionel asked specific questions about his unit. "Fort Bragg, with the 82nd, he said confidently. But when Lionel pressed about the command structure, the Major mixed up details that any actual service member would know. Kendra and Marcus looked so happy, dancing their first dance while guests circled around them. The Major stood near the front, clapping and drawing attention to himself. I decided I wouldn't let him ruin my sister's day. But I also wouldn't let him get away with this. I'd seen too many good soldiers die to let someone play dress-up for attention at my sister's wedding. I just needed the right moment to confront him. The Major maneuvered himself into our family photos like he belonged there. Brielle waved him over enthusiastically, completely unaware of my growing suspicions. I clenched my jaw and smiled for the camera while the imposter stood proudly next to my mother. "Such an honor to have you with us, Major," Brielle said, adjusting her lens. "Could you stand between the parents?" Patrice beamed with pride as if we'd been granted some special privilege. The Major nodded solemnly and took his position, standing unnaturally straight. His posture looked rehearsed rather than habitual. After the photos, Cole approached him with an extended hand. "Thank you for your service, sir. We're honored to have you here." "Just doing my duty, sir. Honor and country," the Major replied. His response sounded like dialogue from a military movie, delivered with practiced sincerity. I studied his boots during the exchange. They were perfectly polished but showed no signs of wear. No scuffs, no creases, no evidence they'd ever marched a single mile. Brand new, straight from the box. The cocktail hour started, and guests migrated to the stone patio. The Major worked the room like a politician, shaking hands and accepting thanks for his service. He used just enough military jargon to sound legitimate to civilians. Lionel cornered him near the bar. "Which battalion were you with at Fort Bragg?" "My buddy was with the 505th. The Major hesitated for a split second. "I was primarily with Special Operations. Can't discuss much of the deployment details." "But you mentioned the 82nd earlier," Lionel pressed. "Which regiment?" "We rotated through several units. Operational security, you understand." The Major sipped his drink and scanned the room, clearly looking for an escape. I texted Holden from across the garden. "This guy is full of shit, mixing up basic unit structures." Holden replied immediately. "Noticed that too. And his ribbon rack is a disaster. Purple heart above bronze star, not a chance." The Major was now regaling a small group with a combat story that sounded suspiciously like a scene from a recent war movie. His details were cinematic: explosions, heroic charges, dramatic rescues. Nothing about the mundane reality of military life. We were pinned down for nearly 7 hours, he told them, gesturing dramatically. I carried 3 wounded men to safety under heavy fire. Nyla, Kendra's maid of honor, looked completely captivated. She introduced him to several of Kendra's college friends, practically gushing as she presented him. This is the Major. He's done 3 tours in Afghanistan. 4 tours, actually, he corrected her. 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, and another classified deployment in 2015. I almost choked on my drink. His timeline was impossible. No one with his apparent rank and age could have served that deployment pattern. I pulled out my phone and searched military records, finding nothing matching his claimed service. Rhiannon approached me at the bar, her voice low. Something's off about that Major, isn't it? He reminds me of that guy who crashed your cousin Darnell's wedding last year, claiming to be a distant relative. You noticed too? I was relieved someone else saw through him. Hard not to. He's trying too hard, she said. What are you going to do? I watched the Major pose for selfies with several guests. His chest puffed out to display his unearned medals. I'm confronting him after dinner. This stolen valor bullshit stops tonight. The reception moved inside for the dinner service. The Major positioned himself at a table near the wedding party, continuing to accept praise and gratitude from unsuspecting guests. He checked his phone frequently, looking pleased with himself. Holden caught my eye across the room and nodded slightly. We'd both seen enough. The man was a fraud, using a uniform to gain access to free food, drinks, and admiration, possibly even gifts. I watched Kendra and Marcus share their first dance, completely unaware of the imposter in our midst. They looked so happy, lost in their moment. I decided then that I wouldn't let this fraud ruin their night. But I also wouldn't let him leave without consequences. I'd seen too many good soldiers die to let someone play dress up for attention and free drinks. I just needed the right moment to confront him. The Major gave an unauthorized toast, raising his glass without being invited. To the brave men and women who serve alongside heroes like myself, he announced loudly. I noticed Tamika and Malik exchange confused glances. They clearly hadn't planned for this stranger to speak at their son's wedding. The Major didn't notice their reaction, too busy soaking up the applause. He launched into another combat story that contradicted his earlier version. This time, he claimed to have been in a different province during the same deployment. The inconsistencies were mounting. I signaled to Holden, who casually positioned himself near the exit. Wesley served the main course, and I noticed the Major complaining about the food. Military-style food is much better than this fancy stuff, he told his table mates, who laughed politely. I decided to make my move during dessert. The Major stood alone at the bar for a moment, checking his phone and smiling at whatever he saw there. I approached him casually, drink in hand. Enjoying yourself, Major? I asked. Absolutely. Beautiful wedding. He straightened his posture again, that rehearsed military bearing. I need to tell you something important, I said, leaning closer. You should check your ribbon placement. It's all wrong. The Major's face drained of color. His body went completely rigid. He knew he'd been caught. The Major gave an unauthorized toast, raising his glass without being invited. To the brave men and women who serve alongside heroes like myself, he announced loudly. The room fell silent as guests politely raised their glasses. I noticed Tamika and Malik exchange confused glances. They clearly hadn't planned for this stranger to speak at their son's wedding. The Major didn't notice their reaction, too busy soaking up the applause. He launched into another combat story that contradicted his earlier version. We were pinned down for nearly 12 hours in Kandahar, he said dramatically. Not 7 hours like I mentioned earlier. My memory gets fuzzy sometimes from the trauma. I signaled to Holden across the room. He understood immediately and casually positioned himself near the exit. We'd both seen enough stolen valor cases to know exactly what was happening. Wesley served the main course, moving efficiently between tables. The Major complained loudly about the food to anyone who would listen. Military-style food is much better than this fancy stuff, he told his table mates, who laughed politely. When you've eaten MREs in a foxhole under enemy fire, you appreciate simple food, he continued. I nearly choked on my water. No one in Afghanistan was fighting from foxholes. This guy was pulling details from Vietnam-era war movies. I decided to make my move during dessert. The Major stood alone at the bar for a moment, checking his phone and smiling at whatever he saw there. I approached him casually, drink in hand. Enjoying yourself, Major? I asked. Absolutely. Beautiful wedding. He straightened his posture again, that rehearsed military bearing. I need to tell you something important, I said, leaning closer. You should check your ribbon placement. It's all wrong. The Major's face drained of color. His body went completely rigid. He knew he'd been caught. I don't know what you mean, he stammered, eyes darting toward the exit. Holden stood there, arms crossed, watching us. Purple Heart above Bronze Star, combat infantry badge next to an air medal, impossible deployment timeline. I kept my voice low. You're not military. You're a fraud. He tried to step away. I need to use the restroom. No. You need to explain why you're crashing my sister's wedding in a uniform you didn't earn. I showed him my phone screen. 3 other weddings in the last month. Same uniform, different names each time. The Major's confidence evaporated. Listen, I'm not hurting anyone. People respect the uniform. They treat me well. I get free drinks, good food. And gifts? Do you collect those too? I asked. His silence was answer enough. Please don't make a scene, he begged, voice barely above a whisper. I'll leave quietly. No police. Empty your pockets first. I demanded. I want to see your ID. He reluctantly pulled out his wallet. Inside were 3 different military ID cards, each with the same photo but different names and ranks. There were also business cards identifying him as everything from a Defense Department consultant to a military chaplain. You disgust me, I said, taking the fake IDs. Men died wearing this uniform. Real men. The major's shoulders slumped. I tried to enlist once. Medical rejection. This was the closest I could get. That's no excuse, I replied. You're leaving now, through the kitchen. My buddy Holden will escort you out. I signaled to Holden, who approached and took the major's arm firmly. Let's go, sir, Holden said with cold professionalism. What about my wallet? The major asked. You'll get it back after we check your car, I said. I'm betting we'll find more uniforms there. The major looked defeated. Please don't tell everyone. Just let me go. You should have thought about that before you crashed my sister's wedding, I replied. Holden, take him out through the kitchen. I don't want to make a scene in front of Kendra. Holden nodded and led the major away. The imposter walked with his head down, no longer standing tall in his stolen uniform. The few guests who noticed assumed he was leaving early on official business. I pocketed the fake IDs and returned to my table. Cole caught my eye from across the room with a questioning look. I gave him a subtle nod to indicate I'd handled the situation. The wedding continued without interruption. Kendra and Marcus cut their cake while guests cheered. The photographer captured the moment perfectly. With no sign of the fraud who had tried to insert himself into our family memories, I stepped outside briefly to check on Holden's progress. He stood in the parking lot next to the major's car, a trunk full of military uniforms visible in the glow of the overhead lights. 4 different branches, Holden said, shaking his head. Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force. Guy's been busy. The major sat on the curb, head in his hands. I felt no sympathy. He'd stolen valor from real heroes for free drinks and attention. I called the police, Holden said quietly. They're sending someone. Apparently he's known to them. I nodded and returned to the reception. The celebration continued, the dance floor packed with happy guests. No one even noticed the major's absence. Later, I'd tell my parents what happened, but for now, I watched my sister dance with her new husband, both of them blissfully unaware of the imposter I'd removed from their special day. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the real heroes I'd served with, the ones who never came home, the ones who deserved to wear those medals, the ones this fraud had dishonored with his pathetic charade. For them, I'd done the right thing, and that was enough. I pulled Cole and Patrice aside while Kendra and Marcus were preparing for their first dance. Their faces fell as I explained the situation. I showed them the fake IDs from the major's wallet. This man is a fraud, I said quietly. He crashes weddings in that uniform for attention and free stuff. Cole's jaw tightened. Are you absolutely certain? Beyond doubt. Holden confirmed it too. We've both served. We know what's real. Patrice looked mortified. I made room for him in our row. I believed him completely. Patrice looked. That's what these guys count on, I said. Holden's escorting him out through the kitchen right now. No scene. I glanced toward the dance floor where Kendra and Marcus were being announced. They had no idea what was happening. That's exactly how I wanted to keep it. Holden texted me from the parking lot. Found 4 different uniforms in his trunk. Army, Marines, Navy, Air Force. Guy's been busy. I stepped outside to check the situation. The major sat on the curb, head in his hands. His car trunk was open, revealing a collection of military uniforms hanging neatly inside. Each one had different rank insignia and name tags. Called the police, Holden said. They're sending someone. Apparently he's known to them. 2 police cruisers arrived about 10 minutes later. They parked with lights off, keeping things discreet. An officer in his 50s approached us, recognizing the situation immediately. 3rd one this month, he said, shaking his head. These guys hit weddings, funerals, anywhere they can get attention. The major was escorted to the police car without resistance. He looked defeated, shoulders slumped in his stolen uniform. The officer took my statement and collected the fake IDs as evidence. I returned to the reception just as Kendra and Marcus finished their first dance. The celebration continued without interruption. No one even noticed the major's absence. Later that night, after most guests had left, I finally told Kendra and Marcus what happened. We sat at an empty table surrounded by discarded centerpieces. You're kidding, Marcus said. That guy in the uniform was fake? Kendra looked stunned. He was in our family photos. I thought he was someone's +1. That's what these guys do, I explained. They count on people being too polite to question a uniform. Imani overheard our conversation and joined us. The same thing happened at my cousin's wedding last year. Guy showed up in a Marine uniform, told war stories all night, then disappeared with the gift envelopes. That's probably what he was planning here, I said. Holden and I caught him before he could make his move. The next morning, a detective called to take my full statement. The major was actually named Raymond Wilkes, dishonorably discharged from the Army 6 years ago for theft. He'd been crashing weddings across 3 states. We found evidence of at least 15 other events, the detective explained. He targets upscale weddings where people won't question a uniform. Sometimes he steals gifts, sometimes just enjoys free food and drinks. Our family gathered for post-wedding brunch at my parents' house. The incident became the main topic of conversation despite my efforts to focus on Kendra and Marcus. I can't believe I fell for it, Patrice said, still embarrassed. I was so impressed by all those medals. Cole shook his head. The man dishonored real soldiers. He should be locked up. He'll face charges, I assured them. Stolen valor, fraud, possibly theft from other weddings. A week later, I received a formal letter from the Military Affairs Office. They thanked me for reporting the incident and confirmed Wilkes had been charged with multiple counts of fraud. Kendra called me that evening. We got our wedding photos back. Brielle edited that fake major out of all the family shots. Good, I said. He doesn't deserve to be part of your memories. Thank you for handling it without causing a scene, Kendra said. Most people would have confronted him right in front of everyone. That would have only given him more attention, I replied. And it was your day, not his. Cole framed one of the wedding photos for his office. The space where the major had stood was empty, digitally removed. It was fitting. The imposter had been erased, leaving only our real family in the picture. Patrice finally stopped beating herself up about being fooled. I was impressed by the uniform, not the man, she admitted. I should have looked closer. That's exactly what these guys count on, I told her. The uniform does the work for them. The wedding album arrived a month later. Kendra and Marcus looked genuinely happy in every photo. The major appeared in none of them. It was as if he'd never been there at all. That's exactly how it should be. The day belonged to my sister and her husband, not to some fraud in a stolen uniform trying to steal valor from real heroes.